Hi, I'm Daniel Gooden, and today we're going to talk all about macro, what it is, and how I use it to help businesses just like yours succeed in the online marketplace. So before we get started, we'll just go over what basic tools we're going to need and we're going to use in today's shoot. I'm going to be shooting today with a Nikon D3X, it's a full frame camera. The lens I've elected to use is a 105mm macro lens from Nikon. We're going to need some gaffer tape. We're going to need some fishing line and hot glue. Tripod, Flashpoint Explorer 600 lights. Let's put it together. Let's see what we can do. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off a length of the fishing line longer than what we anticipate we're going to need, because we're going to use this to support our first drill bit. So don't worry about it if it sticks over the end. Once the glue sets up, then you can cut it. Quickly realized that the string was just too unstable, so I opted to just glue the bits directly to the post on my light stand. I put white gaffer tape on the top of the post to allow a little easier editing later on in Photoshop. And this is our end setup. So I used the dust blower to remove as much of the dust particles as I can. And then it was just a matter of shoot and adjust, check focus. I used live view to make sure that my focus was spot on. And then switch back over to timer release to avoid camera shake. I had to bring in some bounce card in order to light and take away some of the shadows, and you can see in this live view shot here just how limited your depth of focus actually is. Okay, so that's it for our shoot. We've got all of our cutter bits, we've got the side position, we got the end position. Now we're going to load the images into Lightroom, scan through them, make sure we got everything we needed. Then we'll pop them over into Photoshop. We have to remove the supports, the support system that we use, because we glued the cutters to a support in order to take the picture. So we have to remove all of that, clean it up, remove any dust particles or stray pieces of hot glue that could be wisping around. Make everything look good, make it look its best, then we'll have it. Okay. We have the images uploaded into Lightroom, and as you can see, the different colors: red, yellow, blue, green, flag, not flagged. Because we had 18 separate bits, we had to somehow sort them out so we know what's what and we don't get confused in our deliverables. So I've already gone through and done all of the sorting, and I have them broken down by part. So we're not going to go through, and I'm not going to edit every one of these with you. But as you can see this little number 2 here. What that means is that's the second copy of this image. So this is image 2 of 2. This is 1 of 2. This is a TIFF file. This is an NEF file. This had already been edited. So everywhere you see that 2, that means there's 2 copies of that image. One is a TIFF, one is an NEF. So for this video purposes, we're going to go and we're going to start with the raw file of one of these images. So in this instance, there's 3 copies. So it was a re-edit of the original. So if we open it up in full screen, you'll see this is the raw file of the edited image. Now I'd already done in the develop module in Lightroom, I had already done some contrast and exposure adjustment. So 120 and 37, if you look at the numbers, you can either slide the scale to increase or decrease your exposure. We had this set at 120, which I thought looked pretty good. So that's plus 1.2 stops of exposure was increased. And then we increased the contrast by 37. That's basically all I've done in Lightroom. Now you can, in Lightroom, also do some basic cloning and healing, adjustment brushes and things like that. So Lightroom is a very strong editor, and I've got other videos up where I go through more of how to edit in Lightroom. But for this particular video, we're going to be editing in Photoshop. So with that image selected, if we right click, edit in Adobe Photoshop CC 2017, it will automatically pull it over into Photoshop. And I like that seamless integration between Lightroom and Photoshop. It allows you to work back and forth and nothing gets lost. So here we are in Photoshop. And what we're going to do, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate the background layer. I always do that. I never work off of the background layer. I always leave that alone. So I want to do my initial crop. Hold the shift key. That maintains my aspect ratio. I want to do my initial crop, and I want to center this end view of this bit. Not totally centered, but really close in this center square here, so that it fills it up. And that gives me a good, clean end view of that particular bit. So now that I've done that, I also know I want to remove this support system that we have here, and that's showing in the image. So I want to remove that. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to open a new layer in Photoshop, and I'm going to fill that layer with a color, and that color is going to be the same as the background. So once I do that, you'll notice that the image has disappeared because we now have a layer filled with white covering the layer of the bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a mask, a layer mask, and then I'm going to pick my brush tool and paint with black right where that bit is located, so that we're only showing the end view of that bit. Now it's okay to have a little bit of shadow because it gives it some realism here. So once I have that colored in, you can see on our mask icon there, or you can push the slash key and it will show you where you've colored with your mask. So now that we have our bit exposed, I'm going to merge those layers and put them all into one layer. Here, again, duplicate it. And now we can see we have a string or a piece of hot glue or something here. We have a couple of blemishes, dust particles, things like that right here on the end of this bit that we had shot. So we need to remove all of that, and I'm going to do that with our clone stamp tool. Adjust the size of your clone stamp tool to just a little larger than whatever blemish or whatever imperfection, if you will, you want to remove on your image. So, and the point behind this is to make these images look, make these products look their absolute best. So with the naked eye, you couldn't see these particles on this particular bit. It's just too small. But the thing with macro is if there's anything on it, it's gonna pull it up. It's almost like taking pictures under a microscope. So every one of these machine lines that you see on this bit, they're there. You can't see them with your naked eye. You could if you had a magnifying glass over them. That's basically what we've done. Shooting it with a macro lens is we've put a magnifying glass on this. So any of these blemishes, dust particles, dirt, fingerprints, any of that, you can't see it. So you can't remove it before you take the shot because you don't even know that it exists. These lines that you see here are a couple of hundredths of thousandths of an inch deep. I mean, they're very, very minute. But light and macro photography has a tendency to bring out all of that. So now that we've got all of those blemishes removed, we can zoom out here, and you can see that gives you a very defined look of the shape of the end of that bit. We've got a nice white background here, so anybody that were to look at this website and want to know what the end of this particular router bit looks like, they would be able to do that by looking at this picture. So overall, the image looks fairly good. It looks well lit. I don't think there's much we have to do. We could bring in a curves layer and we could increase the contrast, but if you look at that, what that does is it actually increases the look of the depth of those lines, which is not what our customer wants. So if we wanted to decrease that a little bit, we could actually take our curves layer in the opposite S curve. So to get a contrasty layer, you would want a straight S curve. To get the opposite of it, you would want to take your curve in the opposite direction. Oh, it's a little far, I understand. So just bring it back. And then you can also, once you find a good happy medium, you can also reduce the opacity of that to reduce some of the effect on that curves layer. So once we're done and once we're happy with that image, then what I like to do is I always like to flatten my layers. I don't want to save with all of these layers. It makes the files too large. And once I'm happy with the result of the image, I'm never going to come back and re-edit this edit. So I don't need all of these additional layers. So once I flatten it, go to the layers panel, flatten image, which we've already done. Then Command S saves it, and it automatically saves it over in Lightroom. You'll see the file name has changed now to a TIFF file, but it's a -2 TIFF file. So if we go back into Lightroom, you'll see in our library grid panel that now there are 3 of these, 4 actually. 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4, 4 of 4. This 1 of 4, this was our latest edition. So I'd actually edited this one already twice. I did one edit, wasn't happy with that. Did a second edit, and that was a little better. And then we did, for the purposes of this video, this third edit. So once you're back over in Lightroom, what Lightroom is very good at, that I like, it's a lot simpler, is these sliders over here. So once I've done my edit in Photoshop, if I think that background is a little tan, I can increase my whites a little bit to bring it up a little whiter. Now you see that red appear there. What that means is, if you look at our histogram, we have highlight clipping. So you can either pull in your histogram and pull that back until that highlight clipping goes away, or you can lower your whites channel there. Highlight clipping simply means that there is no detailed information here, which we're not concerned about as long as we don't have highlight clipping on our subject. So we could leave this in the red. And then as long as we don't have highlight clipping here, it doesn't really matter. Go back in your library panel, all that highlight clipping's gone, but now the background has changed from tan to white. So that's pretty much it. Once you do a few of these, you really get a good feel for the steps that are necessary, and you can roll through them pretty quickly. If in fact you had multiple files, which we did here, we had 18 files to go through, and you can see that they're all the same, then we were able to get through them pretty quickly. And these are the end edits here. And you can see all the backgrounds look the same. It gives it a very fluid, when people move through this website and look at these different products, they can expect to see all of the different products available shot on the same background, so they get the same expectation. There's no surprises here for their customers, and that's important when you're looking at a website. Thanks for watching this video. Make sure you subscribe, that way you don't miss 1 minute, 1 tip, 1 tutorial coming up every week at DanielGoodenPhotography.com.